Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton with you on Veteran Voices. Thanks for joining us here today. On today's show, we have the opportunity to talk with a combat veteran and a business leader that has and continues to significantly give back to the veteran community. So stay tuned for that as we learn a lot more. Quick programming note before we get started here. This program is part of the Supply Chain Now family of programming. So find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. You type in Veteran Voices, will pop up, and you can find the show that appeals to you. And of course, we would love to have you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. All right, we have a special guest here today. I've been fortunate to have a sneak peek. I've seen him give keynotes earlier before, and that's why I know that his story and his perspective is going to really it's going to be a treat for our audience. So with no further ado, I want to welcome in Jarrad Turner, Senior Director of Warrior Engagement with the Warrior Alliance. Jarrad, how you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing today, Scott?
We're doing, it's been a good week, and this is a great, it's not the end of the week yet, but I was looking forward to this interview, and I think I'm going to be much better off after the next hour. So thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
I appreciate this opportunity. I really thank you very much.
All right, so for starters, Jarrad, we want to learn more about you, right? We're going to get into your military career, your transition, and all the really cool things you're doing at the Warrior Alliance here momentarily. But let's get to know Jarrad Turner Sr. a little bit better. So tell us, where did you grow up? And you got to give us the goods on your upbringing.
All right. So I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I'm the youngest of three boys. My parents are from the South. And I actually, when I was growing up, I wrestled, I played football, and I played lacrosse. So, yeah.
So folks didn't mess with you early. They don't mess with you now probably, but back then, gosh, lacrosse, football, and wrestling, and you had two brothers. Holy cow. I bet you had to fight for a place at the dinner table.
Yeah, there's a funny story. One of my brothers, my middle brother, Mike, everybody had those cement weights in their house when we were younger. So I remember trying to get bigger and stronger, and I had like 200 pounds on there. And, I challenged my brother to, hey, I'm Mr., I can wrestle. I'm Mr. Lacrosse player. I'm Mr. Football. I had a pretty good reputation in lacrosse and football. A guy who's been 5'9" since 8th grade, roughly about 190, 200 pounds, come running at you. Had no earthly idea what to do, but I was just running at you with a stick, yelling like I'm going to rip your head off. So I challenged my brother one day to a bench press contest, and, that's from doing all the push-ups like we used to do back in the days. And my brother, after I get up with my measly 16, and I'm feeling good about myself, he gets under the bar slips, hits him in his chest. He's at like rep 15, 16. I go to pick it up, and he was like, "Get the heck away from me, you lightweight. What the heck is wrong with you?" So I've always played with a chip on my shoulder.
Healthy competition growing up. And is that,
yeah.
Are you still pretty close to both your brothers?
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, when I came home one time, for those people that know my son, Jarrad Jr., he's 15, wears a size 14, and he's 6 feet tall, but we're always wrestling. Yeah. So I came home, and my brother happened to be at my mom's house, and we were supposed to go in the living room, and, you're not supposed to do anything in the living room. Well, he bumped into me. I bumped into him. Next thing I know, the dining room table was broken, and my oldest child was like, "Grandma." I'm like, "Yeah, snitch." What's wrong with you, snitch? So
can't trust anybody these days.
Heck no, your kids will sell you out in a heartbeat. They love you, and they, tell you, "Dad, I love you so much," and "Dad, you're the best." And hey, my youngest, who is 13, she'll call me. She'll say, "Hey, big fella," and I'm like, quit making fun of me. And she likes to rub me on my head. So I'm like, you know something, I'm getting tired of y'all already. But
Well, it sounds like you
yeah.
had growing up. It sounds like you had a loving family, great relationships with your brother. A lot of competition that probably drove. I'm assuming would drive you all to really excel, whether it's sports or academics or just life in general. And it's really cool to hear how that's kind of carried on to today's environment and be able to have, enjoy that same relationship as well as with your own children, which is really cool. So your son is Jarrad Jr. and your daughter is?
So I have two girls. My oldest is Alexandria, or Alex, and my son, Jarrad Jr., and then my youngest, Christina, or as we like to call her, Chris.
So, all right. So I'm going to ask you a little curveball here, Jarrad, but I'm sure it's one you hit it out of the park. Earlier today, we were talking with the mother of three, and I'm the father of three, and one of the co-hosts we do a lot of work with also is a father of three, and we were all talking about, hey, what is one piece of advice out of all the countless pieces of advice we give our kids, and how just like when we were small, in one ear and out the other. But if there's one piece of advice that you really hope that all three of your kids listen to and apply as they, go through their journey, what would that one piece of advice be?
That is definitely a curveball. For me, that one piece of advice, honestly, is learn how to love yourself before you can love others. I grew up, my dad was always around. My dad is actually just, he's the hardest working man I've ever known, honestly speaking. He worked, at one time, he worked three jobs to make sure that I could go to a Catholic school. My hat goes off to that guy every day, and I'm so thankful for that. But, that older generation, they never really said that they loved you a lot, So I'm always just letting my kids know every conversation just how much I love them and how thankful I am for them. And after I got injured and after I was medically retired from the Army, one of the things that I was able to do with a friend of mine through Camp Twin Lakes is we were able to create a kids camp called Kids Serve 2. We served over 700 kids
Wow.
at that kids camp. But, one of those things is just being able to tell your kids that you love them and being able to express that emotion of love and, in just a healthy, positive way. You served, I served. So we're part of this brotherhood that is so much greater than ourselves. And that level of commitment and loyalty, when it's all broken down, it's really love. I love my brothers in arms. I love my sisters in arms. That's why I call them my brothers. We trained hard. We fought hard. We did everything hard. Now, whether you get that in the military or whether you get that playing lacrosse or football or any other type of team sport, I personally feel that when you learn how to love yourself and you learn how to accept yourself for who you are, you can drive yourself and push yourself harder than anything else. So that's the one thing that I would definitely say.
I love that. Well, that wasn't much of a curveball because you crushed it. That's if we were in Truist Park, that'd be somewhere in Midtown, somewhere the ball would be. So I appreciate you tackling that because as parents and the responsibilities we have, and as we try to share both what's worked well for us and what didn't work so well, all these best practices and advice we pass along. We just hope our kids cling to at least one of them, So good stuff there. And I appreciate your story about your father. I'll tell you, hardworking people are salt of the earth. And it goes, a lot of folks will talk about hard work, but man, folks that just do it, put their head down and are kind of, quiet about it. I mean, that's really salt of the earth. So let's talk about, as we kind of segue, you're touching about some of your aspects of your military career. Let's kind of go ahead and take some steps in that direction. But first, let's talk about what made you join the military, Jarrad.
Actually being a dad, for one, and then two, working at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I was roughly 24, 25 when I began working at the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. And if you think about that, just the history that was there, when I was there, I was very fortunate enough, sadly, to be there. This was during a time of our recent history where we had the church burnings. And just looking at the commitment of those men and women that work at the Southern Poverty Law Center, and understanding that in many ways, those men and women were heroes. Now, they didn't have any weapons. Their weapon was the law, if you will. They stood in the face of adversity, the face of racism, the face of hatred, and they said, this is not the right thing to do. So honestly, working there and meeting a former Army Ranger, I don't know if you're ever a former, but and a Marine, and just listening to them, it kind of, I was inspired, if you will, to do something that was greater than myself, and started really wanting to have that legacy and questioning myself, who was I to be able to really just prosper from these different fruits of everybody else's labor. Specifically, on my mom and my dad's side of the family, we both, I was fortunate to have family members that were service members. If we look back in Livingston, Alabama, small town, West Alabama, if you will, in a small church called Shady Grove Baptist Church, I was able to see the tombstone from World War I from a PFC Hale. So that is my great-great-great-grandfather.
Wow.
And I think about, that you were PFC, and think about all of us who have been able to serve and to honor his legacy and his memory, and, to really do that. So that's really the antithesis of me joining the Army, and really making that decision. I didn't know what was going to take place, but yeah, made that decision.
What year was it that you entered the Army?
2000.
2000. Okay, so this was after you'd already graduated from Alabama State University, I believe. Is that right?
Correct.
You'd been working already, exposed to the real world, so to speak, with the Southern Poverty Law Center in Birmingham, and then you were inspired. Montgomery. I know you said Montgomery. My brain and hand do not work in conjunction sometimes. All right, so Montgomery, and so you were inspired. Not only, it sounds like, from your family history and a track record of serving, but by some folks that you were around at the time. So joined the Army in 2000 before any of us knew how the world was just about to change. So when you joined the Army and got out of boot camp and got out of what I'm not sure, and Air Force's tech school, whatever the Army calls it, what was your MOS? What was your role?
So my original MOS was actually that of a fueler. So I was a quartermaster. It's kind of, I have to laugh because my original contract actually said medic, but the things that take place in the Army with the recruiter. So,
it happens in the Air Force too, in case you didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So medic is what you kind of signed up for, and then quartermaster,
right.
Which is kind of supply chain related, right?
Yes, definitely. So it was kind of interesting. Had all of this background in supply chain, but even in the Army, you have I think it was called I can't remember right now, but it was, you could take an ASI, like a specialty skill set as a medic. So I got onto that and was fortunate enough that the Army said, okay, now we're going to send you the actual AIT to become a medic. So I went to 2 AITs. That kind of sucks, but it is what it is, I mean, hey, what do they say? They say embrace the suck when you're in the Army. So you just embrace the suck, literally. But
there's a reason that journey. That's why you're here, and you're here, destiny to give back. So many folks have benefited, and who'd have thunk? One of the reasons is because you went to 2 AITs in the Army. So embracing the suck has helped plenty of others. All right. So I'm sorry, you're going to continue on through. So you sound like you went back and became a medic in the Army. Is that right?
Correct. I became a medic in the Army, but, somewhat similar to what you were alluding to, I would have never had thought what was going to take place in 2001. Actually, when I speak about my dad, it always chokes me up. My dad is still living, but as a result of September 11th, after September 11th, shortly after that, he had a massive stroke. Yeah. So unfortunately, I even had to give my dad CPR one time. So the skills that you learn in the Army, you just never know how they're personally going to be able to affect you. But yeah, you just never know what the future has ahead of you, or in store for you. So
your father's still with us? They still live in Long Island, New York?
No, dad has actually moved. Dad is with the sisters, and that's totally cool. I have to laugh because so my dad, being the hard worker that he is, one year when I was younger, I had told him, I said, "Dad, you can't run a marathon," and he's like, "Marathon?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "There's no way in the world you can run a marathon." I'm like, "You haven't trained for one," and he's like, "Well, you pick one and I'll train for it," and I'm like, "All right, whatever." So I pick a date, and it's like 40 days out, and it was a half marathon, but here it is, the man that works two jobs wakes up one morning. When I used to run for wrestling and football and lacrosse practice, he wakes up and I'm like, "Dad, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I got to start training for this thing." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm going to run my little 3.5 miles." And he's like, "No, just go ahead and run 6 with me." And, I'm running 6 with him, and I'm just like, my heart's about to explode because Dad is 6 feet tall and I'm 5'9". So as you can imagine, and I'm just looking at this guy like, is there anything that he can't do? So 40 days after that, he actually ran a half marathon just because the son said he couldn't do it.
So all right, Jarrad, and I admire that. What a great testimony to your father. Are you a chip off the block when someone tells you or challenges you that you can't do something, or do you take that as motivation and make it happen?
I'm just going to keep smiling and laughing right now because probably either my physical therapist, my occupational therapist, or my orthopedist is probably going to hear this. And I'm going to defy every order that they've given me.
Love it.
For the right reason, I am going to run. I'm going to push myself. I've been very, very fortunate to be athletically inclined, and I've also been very, very fortunate to be incredibly hard-headed and stubborn. So yeah, there you go.
I like how you answered that question. So good stuff there. All right, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about some of the folks that you served with. Maybe as a starter, tell us, when 2001 and the years that followed. Talk a little bit about what that meant for your journey with the Army, and then let's talk about some of the folks you served with.
September 11th it got everybody. Plain and simple. I remember flying back to New York, going into LaGuardia Airport and looking at the towers, literally in a plane, looking down at the towers. And I remember, even though we were in the plane, the smell of the recycled air in the plane changed. Any of us who were part of that initial push, you understand that it was just really, really different. I remember our leadership, our first sergeant, our commander, telling us that, hey, we're going to get in, we're going to get out. It's going to be like Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and one of my battle buddies, I remember him saying, "We ain't going nowhere." Our first deployment was 15 months. Now you would go to jail now if you tried to do that, but part of being in that initial push, it just was what it was.
Just for clarification for some of our listeners that may not be as familiar, you're talking about the initial push into Afghanistan, is that right?
Well, the initial push into Iraq.
Sorry.
Into Iraq, yeah. That was ugly. Very simply stated, that was just very ugly. I remember two things that really kind of hit me. I remember getting back to Atlanta because I was in Alabama. before everything took place. I was visiting some friends, and I remember just looking at people, and it was just a real crazy time, if you will. And I remember coming back. My mom at the time had worked for the IRS, and I remember just trying to calm her down and just telling her, Mom, I don't know what's about to happen, but Mom, stay here. Stay here. Just you don't get on the road unless they call you. Don't do anything. I remember from where our home is at, there's always planes flying all over the place, and I remember just looking up, not seeing any planes and not hearing anything. Surprisingly, as I told you, I have family members who are also serving. My cousin, who retired as a lieutenant general in the Marine Corps, Lieutenant General Willie Williams. He was on the side of the Pentagon when the Pentagon got hit that day. So he was pulling out fellow Marines and fellow service members. It's hard to talk about September 11th, to be honest with you. It's hard to talk about that time because when we were in Iraq, I remember looking at some of the guard units and some of the things that they had written on their vehicles, and some of the names that they had written of the loved ones from New York. It's hard because as a result, I've lost 7 to combat and 11 to suicide. But those moments were also some of the best moments of my life, as you can imagine. I remember when we flew into Kuwait, and I remember when the door opened up and the heat wave that hit everybody, and it was like, what in the god awful?
But it's a dry heat, as they said, right? It's a dry heat. I spent 45 days in Kuwait, and it was hot.
Yeah, it was just hot. I think it was, I don't even remember what time we got there, but I remember waking up the next day, and it was like nobody slept. So it was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you walk outside this GP median tent, and it's like 90 degrees. You're like, what the heck is going on? The Kuwait days were good for us, but it's, when we got into Iraq, and unfortunately we didn't have all the needs. So not showering and the salt stains coming through your uniform, and you're just like, man, you smell. Nah, bro, you smell like, honestly, we both smell in hell. This is pretty nasty, but hey, you gotta love it.
So how many combat tours did you serve, and were all of them in Iraq?
Yeah, both of them were in Iraq. I did 2 tours. First one was 15 months. The second one was 9 months because I got injured on that second tour. So
I mean, it's just it is for. I did, as I've shared with folks, I am not a combat veteran. I was a data analyst in the Air Force. But in my time and rubbing elbows with the folks that were combat veterans, and certainly in the 18 years since that I got out, hearing the stories. And I mean, these days we complain when we don't get our package in a day, or 2 hours in some cases. My dad served in Iraq. He did a tour in Iraq as a National Guard, went into a combat zone. And it's amazing what we ask from our military and the immense sacrifices they make, so what, without, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's a thing or two that folks that haven't served or haven't been in combat, that there's something you'd like them to know, important for them to understand what takes place, what would that be?
So the most important thing, well, actually, I probably have 2. The most important thing is you got to learn how to trust your brother to the left and right of you. If you do not trust them, you're not going to make it. I can tell you that right now. And when I say trust, I mean, understand it doesn't matter where they're from. It doesn't matter where the heck what they look like. They're wearing the same uniform, and, they're going to sacrifice for you. And, a lot of us will be willing to sacrifice from them. Again, those are my brothers, plain and simple. 2, understand, and it's kind of interesting that we're here in this pandemic right now. The one thing that combat has taught me personally is that, listen, sometimes life is going to just open up something and it's going to be crazy, and you have no earthly idea what the next day is going to bring. But be incredibly thankful for the moment that you have right here in front of you, and be incredibly thankful for the people that you're with, because it is not guaranteed that they're going to be there tomorrow, the next hour, what have you. It's just not guaranteed. So truly train and pray and be hopeful for the next day, but live life to its fullest. I met one of my former battle buddies. I can't call him. He's now a CW3, Chief Warrant Officer 3 in the Army. But it was interesting. We had a small warehouse that we kind of lived out of and worked out of. And he caught me at the gym not too long ago, and he was just laughing. And I'm like, "What are you laughing at?" He was like, "You're the only person I know you see 225 on the bench, and you're like, all right, that's where we started." He's like, "What the heck?"
I would be laughing like your friend there. I mean, that is clearly you were setting some records, and maybe still do. I don't know. I'm kind of jealous. I wish I could sit down and start at benching 225 as if that was the first 30 reps. But I don't walk in your shoes.
Here's the record. You still got hair. I don't, and you ain't got no gray. So if anything, I got a whole bunch of gray hair right now, and I used to claim old man status, and nobody believed me back then. No, I'm really claiming it now. Like, I'm really trying to tell them I'm an old man, and they still don't believe me. So I don't know what it is, man.
Well, so you were talking there a moment ago about someone you served with who is still in a Chief Warrant Officer, CW3. Let's talk about who else comes to mind, and I'm sure that there's no shortage of folks you served with or you worked for or folks that worked for you. Give us another friend of yours or fellow soldier of yours that you think of when you think about your active duty service.
Well, I had the honor of serving with a Chief Warrant Officer for Jackson, older man. He just really he was from Montana, just old school, just old school, and taught me about life. It was kind of interesting. He was just like, he was like, "Hey, you got kids?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got kids, wife," and he was just like, "Well, you need to start looking about life insurance and annuities and investments and, purchasing your home. And once you get a home, get a few rental properties and just different things like that." He was a shorter man, but he was like as wide as an oak tree, for crying out loud. And he just, every once in a while, a few explicatives come out of his mouth, and that was that. One of the other gentlemen or brothers in arms that I had the honor of serving with was Chief Warrant Officer Dixon. And Chief was PBO, property book officer, and it was kind of interesting because, as you get into different things, you start understanding that nothing moves without supply. Plain and simple. I don't care how hard you find the hardest of the hardest operator, Ranger, MARSOC, Marine, you ain't going nowhere unless you got equipment. I
love that.
I don't care who you are. Yeah, and I just remembered, every once in a while, emphasis on you, sometimes believe your own hype. And I remember one time we had a mission that we needed to go on, and I was telling Chief that, "Hey, Chief, we need this, 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 and this." And he's like, "Well, you ain't going to get this, this, this." And I was like, "Well, Chief, the commander said that we need this." And it was simple. He was like, "Listen, I don't care how big you daggone are. You tell him we ain't got it, and that mission ain't about to go down." He was like, "I don't get in your medical lane, do you?" And I was like, "Hey, Chief, don't kill the messenger, all right? Don't kill the messenger."
Well, there's no shortage of good, very honorable folks that you served beside your brothers and sisters in arms. And, to hear, I think you said you lost 8. Is that right, in combat?
So I lost 7 to combat and 11 to suicide. Unfortunately, one of the guys that I served with that sticks out, his name is Cruz, Specialist Stephen Cruz. This guy was a gentle giant. I mean, literally was a gentle giant. It was him and Jason Scrub. We used to call them the Twin Towers because if you tried to play basketball against them, it was not going to be a good thing for you. And then it was a fellow brother in arms also, Dickie, Specialist Dickie. He was another just ridiculously tall guy, and it was like, good God, all I got, the good Lord, all he gave me was strength. So I could hit you hard as hell, and I could lift things hard as heavy as hell. So, but I didn't get any height, so it is what it is.
When you look back, because we're going to talk about your transition next, and some of the challenges you faced there, and then that ensuing transition. When you look back at, I think, 10 years in active duty, is that right?
Yeah, 10 years.
10 years. So when you look back and you think about the highest of highs and lowest of lows, and no shortage of challenges nor loss, as you mentioned, some of these fine people, what do you look back and what are you going to tell your kids about, your grandkids about, your great grandkids? What are you most proud about?
One of the things I definitely would like to tell, and I've told this, you can get through anything as long as you guys got a real good cook. And we had Sergeant First Class Ham, who he literally brought his own, he had a Foot Locker of like spices. So he made those sea rash and those MREs, that stuff was the best in the world. It'd kill you, but it was the best in the world. I think one of the other things is just you really have to learn and get to know people for who they are. I think about the time that we're in right now and a lot of social unrest and, racism and just the pandemic. But I was very fortunate that people that I've served with, white, black, Asian, Latino, they were just good people, plain and simple. And they would do anything for you. And, that just, for me, just reminds me of you can get through anything if, one, you realize that you don't have to do it by yourself, and then, two, realize, get the right people around you. Get people that are committed to the cause, committed to the mission, committed to just not quitting, and you'll be able to overcome.
Wow. We're going to have you back next week for the follow-up hour. I mean, there's so much stuff. You've got no shortage of stories, I'm sure, that we can't get to today, and I appreciate you sharing. So let's get into your transition and maybe what preceded that, because I know you had some really challenging set of circumstances. Let's talk about what led you to leaving the Army or separating from the Army.
So unfortunately, when I got injured on my second deployment, as a result of that, I ended up I had a piece of shrapnel that kind of filleted me open. Then I also ended up having to have 4 shoulder surgeries, 2 elbow surgeries, and as a result, post-traumatic stress and TBI. So when you think about that, unfortunately, that's what made me have to separate from the Army. That was tough right there.
I can only imagine. It's really tough, I think, for a lot of folks to put ourselves in your shoes. But to sit here with you 10 years roughly later, and how and I want to get into a little bit of the story, but how you're able to overcome these health challenges, and then and also overcome just the combat experience and PTSD and how that really impacts you. I think I saw where you said, hey, war always changes you. Even if you don't get injured or hurt or you have significant loss, it's going to change who you are. I think I was reading an earlier interview you had. So to be here now and see what you do to give back, which we'll talk about in a second about the Warrior Alliance and other things that you've done, including kids served too, which you mentioned on the front of the interview. But how did you?
Right.
So how did you break through these health challenges and get back and get in a good spot where you could, after you kind of took care of yourself, you could be in position to take care of others? How did you get through that?
So one of the things, if you think about it, I said that you don't have to do these things alone. It's imperative that you realize that there's others typically on the other side that are trying to help you. For me, that others was actually the Shepherd Center Share Military Initiative. This is a polytrauma treatment facility or program for post 9/11 veterans. So that was really that was the one main factor. The other factor was getting involved. For me, I had to re-engage and find where my fellow brothers and sisters were. When you're in uniform, everybody looks the same. You know where to go. We used to have this concept on active duty, one stop. You're probably familiar with that term. So, but when you separate from service, coming back to Atlanta, Georgia, it was like, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? I was medically retired in San Antonio, Texas, and I do not, to this day, I don't remember driving from San Antonio to Atlanta, Georgia. There's literally a week of my life I have no recollection of, and that's because I have what you would call a traumatic brain injury. And, having vertigo, being on 3 pages of medication. When I got admitted to the Share Military Initiative, again, 3 pages of medication, and I actually I had 9 ulcers from taking all the meds.
Wow. Was that a program here in Atlanta? You said it was a shared military initiative?
So it's the Share Military Initiative, and it's at the Shepherd Center. So essentially, Bernie Marcus, the co-founder of Home Depot, the way he tells the story was he was sitting at home and he was watching TV, and he was listening to what was going on at the VA and the fact that there was a lack of service for our veterans who had been recently separated. And I don't want to quote Mr. Marcus, but, his thing was, we're about to have another Vietnam. We didn't take care of the Vietnam era veterans. And here it is now, we're about to fail this generation of veterans. And it's just, one of those things where you're just saying, if it wasn't for him and his dedication, it just would have been a problem, So that's what we have going on.
This program was critical to rehabbing where you were and getting you in position to give back to others. Eventually, after how long would you call it that rehabilitation time period as part of your transition? How long did it take you, do you think, just ballpark terms, to get back to where you were comfortable and could go out and continue your career?
So actually, it's an ongoing process. We call TBI, traumatic brain injury, the gift that keeps giving. Okay. It's one of those things that, so for me, I have vestibular issues, so I have to read larger fonts. I still have vertigo occasionally. So those are things that it's going to continue. For me, again, having 2 elbow surgeries, having 4 shoulder surgeries, having 2 surgeries on my jaw. If you want to say like the hardcore intense aspect of that, you have to think it was about 2 years worth of rehabilitation that I went through.
And I apologize. I didn't, a lot of times I don't say the right words. I know that it's not like I figure it's not like a car where, if something's wrong with a piece, you replace it and it's fixed. I probably should have restated that, where it is a continuous journey. And as you put it, the gift that keeps on giving, it probably has some residual stuff that will always be with you. So I didn't mean to make light of these challenges. So, all right. So you said about 2 years of really intense hands-on therapy. And then of course, all of the things that linger that to this day, you still get through. Let's talk about, your kind of, not your health transition and your rehabilitation. Let's talk about your transition into the next phase of your career. So what was the first thing post active duty, post Army that where you started your business career?
So I was actually very fortunate that when I separated from the Army, because I was a medic, I was able to work for the VA Medical Center first. And then after working for the VA Medical Center, I was able to work for the Veteran Benefits Administration. And then I was able to work for the DAV and Wounded Warrior Project, and now serve as the director for the Warrior Alliance. My transition actually was a very good one. Again, if I was not able to attend college and had that, collegiate background and have a specialized skill that was still needed, I don't know if that transition would have been so well. But I was very fortunate for that.
So you've been able to see several veteran service organizations and probably see a few different approaches. So let's talk about, before we talk about the Warrior Alliance, if you had to give some advice to other veterans transitioning, regardless of service, regardless of the branch, regardless of what their role would be, whether, for that matter, regardless if they're enlisted or officer. I was enlisted, and I think a lot of enlisted folks don't have that professional network that a lot of officers do. Not every officer, but a lot of officers, right? And I know for me, just in my experience, that lack of network coming back after 2 years, finishing out my term with the Air Force, I really suffered. I remember getting a Rolodex from a dear friend of recruiters. Because I didn't know any recruiters. I didn't even know what I was poised to do, right? And I just started dialing these recruiters and sending them my very slim resume, trying to find a job. But what advice would you give to folks that are separating and looking to find their private sector job?
I actually have 3 tidbits, if you will. The first, everything that it is incredibly valuable, but you are going to have to repackage it, and don't try to do it by yourself. Secondly, just because you're not in uniform anymore, you still have a ton of work to do. And then lastly, make sure that you take time and be incredibly happy that you had an opportunity to serve. That first bit of advice, when I think about my transition was, I was very fortunate. Again, I did have a network to come back to. It was a small network, but I had a network. There's a lot of us who do not have a network. You really need to get in contact with a transition specialist really a year out. I would not wait even 6 months. I would say a year out. When you've made that final decision and that it's time, it's time for you to go ahead and separate from service, you need to truly think about what you're getting ready to get into. As the simple things. When we're in service, we're paid on the 1st and 15th. You get sick, you get hurt, guess what? You're going to get paid regardless.
Often inaccurately.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. To our I can't remember the office that I found myself in a lot. I'm just picking on those folks that build the LES statements, all that stuff. So I'm just picking, but it happens.
There's 2 things that will stop a war. Okay, let a soldier find out that their family's not getting taken care of. You got a problem.
That's right.
Let them not get paid. You got a bigger problem. Okay, because when that spouse reaches out and they said, "Hey, guess what? The bills aren't." Oh, First Sergeant, we got a serious problem. I would tell people, you got to really start thinking about this process and understanding that even though there's good intentions in the civilian sector, the reality of it is this. A lot of people in the civilian sector have no earthly idea what to do with us. And they don't understand the level of skills because it's a completely different network. Unless you're in a fraternity or unless you're in some type of national club, guess what? You're not building that network. I often would tell those who are transitioning, whatever your rank is, lieutenant colonel, general such and such, hey, guess what? That's not your first name anymore. Your first name is what your first name is, okay? And let people know that it's not about where you're coming from, but where you want to go. because a lot of times they're not able to relate. You know, if I tell somebody, hey, I was a combat medic, and just the rigors of training that, you know, hey, we get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and we would do, I'm putting soldiers through simulators, or, you know, hey, we're going to do a 15-mile forced ruck march with, you know, 45 to 60 pounds of gear in your back, and we're going to get it done in 3 hours flat. And they're going to be looking at you like, first and foremost, what the heck is humping? Because I'm about to call HR on you first and foremost.
They don't know what they don't know, right? It's the human element, right? Oftentimes they want to help, but they can't relate. And I like how you put in your first tidbit what you know and what you learned in the military. It's really valuable, but you're going to have to repackage it. And don't try to do that yourself. As you said, hey, find some help, get a resource, get a third party that really knows how to repackage it so you can really put your best foot forward in that civilian ease, you know, that language, so that they can really pick up and see where that value comes to play, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's really, you know, the United States, we're a proudful nation, and, you know, truly there is a lot of commitment to the veterans and the service members. But at the Warrior Alliance, one of the things that we say often is, you know, are you veteran friendly or are you warrior committed? I think right now we're learning as a society what warrior committed really means. You have to understand that a lot of people, they can't relate. So it is on your behalf. You are an ambassador to the war, to society, and you really are trying to get them to understand, hey, yes, I might have done some hardcore things in the past, but look, I'm your neighbor. You know, I'm your coach. I'm your teacher. I'm your business consultant. I'm a human being just like you. So you have to make yourself relatable. That second tidbit is, you know, or really the third one, but you have to kind of tell society that you're proud of what you did. A lot of men and women or civilians, they don't necessarily have family members that have served. So again, you know, a lot of my, the kids that I was coaching, I'm sorry, again, COVID lifestyle right now, but a lot of the kids, I mean, I would have never thought that I was going to be a lacrosse coach. Again, I'm from Long Island, New York, and, you know, here it is, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's like, what, you're about to coach lacrosse? Yeah. You know, that's kind of crazy to me, but a lot of my players they had no earthly idea that I had even served. And, you know, I told them the stories of the Army, and I told them about the level of camaraderie and the level of commitment and, you know, what that meant. And essentially started rebranding myself, not as not as the Army guy, but hey, I'm just your coach that happens to have served in the Army, or hey, you know, I'm this nonprofit leader that happens to have served in the Army, you know. So you really get to a point where you're talking about who you are now and not who you were in the past.
I love that, because it also, when I hear you say that, it also speaks to the art of the possible and what you can become and all the potential you have post-military, post-active duty, right? You're not limited to where you come from. So I love that message. I hope you shared. All right, so let's talk. You mentioned the Warrior Alliance. Let's talk about the Warrior Alliance. Let's talk about what the organization does, and then let's talk about where you spend your time. But before you do, sorry, you mentioned Warrior Committed, right?
Right.
All right. So last time that I saw you, and we had a very brief chance to chat, you were one of the keynotes for a Vetlanta Summit that was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And back behind you, I'm almost positive, there was a big Warrior Committed backdrop or sign or something. And I got a great snapshot of you while you were speaking. Not to put words in your mouth, but Mr. Arthur Blank, when we look at folks that put their money where their mouth is to communities that really can use it, I've just long admired what he's done and what his the foundation that he's connected to, and of course the Falcons. It seems like they're certainly helping a lot of people, including veterans, but a lot of folks. I hope we can label them Warrior Committed.
They are definitely Warrior Committed. You know, when I say Warrior Committed, I want you to think about when we see service members walking through the airport, a lot of times you just see people start clapping their hands and just saying thank you. But the reality of it is this: if you see a ton of service members start walking through the airport in Atlanta, Georgia, folks, they're probably coming from Fort Benning, okay? They ain't done nothing yet, okay? So let's just go ahead. Let's get rid of that right there. No, be warrior committed is simply this. It's not just a handshake. It's not just lip service. It is actually actions behind the words. You know, you mentioned Art the Blank. When you start thinking about the Atlanta Falcons, the Atlanta United, the Blank family businesses, you have to also think about Steve Cannon. Steve Cannon, West Point graduate. Steve Cannon also served our country. And, you know, he's really that one person who kind of talked to Mr. Blank and said, hey, sir, you know, we have to do this because it's the right thing to do. We always have to acknowledge our service members and our veterans. That is being warrior committed. That is taking your business, your brand, and bringing people in and acknowledging their service, you know, regardless of whatever the NFL is doing. And I can honestly attest to this. The Atlanta Falcons are doing things with the kids of veterans. They're doing things for veterans. They're doing things for service members. And it's not just the Falcons. It's the Atlanta United. It's their entire family business and their brand that stands not behind. Because when you start thinking about, hey, I stand behind you, well, that means you're behind me. When I'm in battle, you're shoulder to shoulder with me. I don't need you behind me. I need you shoulder to shoulder with me, and that's what Warrior Committed is about. Warrior Committed means that, hey, we're going to look at our company, we're going to look at our organization, and you know something? We're going to realize that we can probably do better. And when I say do better, the veterans that you have in your company or organization, do you have programs that are actually specifically for those veterans? Do you have programs that are for their caregivers? Because if you need employees, guess what? You take care of those veterans and their family members, oh, you're going to have a ton of employees. That's building your legacy. That's building your brand. That's Warrior Committed. You know, Warrior Committed is saying that, hey, the status quo is unacceptable. Warrior Committed says, okay, we're not going to wait for the government to come in and solve this problem. Does the government have the resources? Yes. And they also have typically 3,000 to 4,000 pages worth of regulations that prohibit you from getting to those resources. So Warrior Committed for us is essentially taking a platform like Salesforce and adopting it through one of our partners, which is called America's Warrior Partnership, and using the data, but then also having the manpower. So we're using a concept of the human-centered design. So where I have a team of actual veterans and family caregivers called navigators that if you contact us, you're actually going to reach somebody. We don't profess to be the organization that has it all, but what we do profess to be is the organization that has memorandums of understanding and service level agreements with roughly right now 27 organizations. And through those 27 organizations, we've been able to serve, provide services, if you will, for 3,000 plus veterans in the greater Atlanta metropolitan area.
That is moving the needle. That's making a huge impact. That's Warrior Committed. And it's not, as much as we all appreciate the gestures, the simple gestures, right? You're talking about the airports and you know, the folks that, you know, thank you for your service and all. And that's highly appreciated. But gosh, we've got to do so much more. We have a debt, huge debt that we all own, that if we live here, to take care of the folks that have taken care of us and gone and served, especially in combat. Because when they come back, they've got needs, and that's our debt. So I love the little bit you've shared. I know that y'all's mission, your organization goes a lot deeper and further than what the little bit you shared already. And when I say a little bit, that in terms of brevity, because I want to protect your time. But anything else about the Warrior Alliance that you think when folks hear that it's really important they understand one other element as to the mission or as to how you serve or what have you?
So I will touch on that one thing when it comes to the Warrior Alliance, but I also want to acknowledge because sometimes we make the mistake, if you will, of saying that your service has to be overseas. I want to recognize those men and women from the Georgia National Guard, that you had over 2,100 guardsmen that were deployed to New York, California. I mean, we do so many things, or they do so many things. It's not just overseas.
Right.
When the crap hits the fan, we got to remember that it is these men and women who, they might don the same uniform that active duty dons, but they're your neighbors. And they just decided to step up and say, hey, there's something greater than myself. And not only do they have civilian jobs, but they said, hey, I'm going to serve the country by being a reservist or a National Guardsman at the same time. So I really want to recognize that, especially, during this time of the pandemic, because again, that's 2,100 men and women who honorably left their own families in the time of a crisis and say, hey, I've got to go do this because my country, my state has called me. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge their sacrifice as well, because it's not just always overseas. So getting back to the aspect of the Warrior Alliance, and what I want people to understand is this: the previous models when it comes to a veteran service organization is, hey, you have an organization, and they say, okay, I'm going to have everything that you need inside these four walls that encompass the organization. That's just not the reality, folks. That's not the reality. You have, entities like the Shepherd Center. This is a top 10 spinal cord rehabilitational facility that, oh, by the way, has a veterans program. So they're addressing neurological issues in the veteran community at no cost whatsoever. If the Warrior Alliance tried to do that, honestly, there's no way in the world we could do that. We're not set up to do that. An organization like Camp Twin Lakes, Family Warrior Weekend, and Kids Serve 2 Camp. Kids Serve 2 Camp through Camp Twin Lakes, here it is. This program is for the kids of veterans and service members. You're talking about going to a week-long camp for $45 for your kids. Now, wow. I don't know how many, right, Family Warrior Weekend. Yeah.
Can they go multiple weeks? I already got some ideas for my 3, and a lot of camps. You got Vacation Bible School that typically is free, and I don't want to tell on us, but we look for a variety of vacation Bible schools, right? Keep them kids busy. But yeah, $45, kidding aside, $45 for a week. I mean, what a and so to tie it back, the Warrior Alliance helps make these types of opportunities happen. Is that right?
Correct. So what will happen is the warrior, and again, for our purposes, a warrior is any veteran or service member that has registered with us. As long as I can verify that they have a honorable discharge, and as long as I can verify their service, because reservists and National Guardsmen don't always get DD-214s, then they are eligible for our resources for veterans. We call everybody warriors because we honestly believe that you are a warrior. Look, needs of the Army or needs of the service will dictate what's going to happen. Some people got deployed. Some of us didn't get deployed. Look, I will not sit up here and tell a lie and say, oh, when the crap hits the fan, yeah, send me. No. When the crap hits the fan, I was like, I don't believe what the heck is going on. I started thinking about my legacy as a dad, but I was very fortunate that, hey, the Army trained me. I had the skill set. I was with the right unit, right team, right platoon, right company. And it is what it is. We got sent over. We did what we had to do. But when it comes to the Warrior Alliance, we take those men and women. We have an intake coordinator who will get all your information, make sure that we have all your demographic information, and then we'll connect you to one of our navigators. Our navigators will put you through a process of just learning who you are, understanding your needs, and understanding what actually sometimes the things that we talk about aren't necessarily the things that we need to be so concerned with. We're very fortunate that we have a survey based upon the Department of Health and Human Services in Utah called the SF-12. It's 12 questions that a veteran or a warrior can answer that gives us a glimpse into understanding mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually where you were at 4 weeks prior to engaging with us. For us, it's understanding your totality so we can truly address your needs. For some people, they just want to connect with fellow veterans. Okay, that's typically a simple one. But for others, there might be some financial instability, some food instability, some emotional instability. Well, we got to understand, okay, what got you to this place? The VA is the largest veteran entity, plain and simple. We are essentially a triage when it comes to the VA. At some point or another, you're going to have to go to the VA, but what we want to be able to do is get you squared away, make sure that you're at least at a very stable position. So then when it's time for you to engage with the VA, guess what? All of your needs are met, and you can go in there and truly express your needs in a very calm, cool, collective manner. So we have 27 partners that allow us to do this, and by using Salesforce, it allows us to connect with all 27 partners. It also allows to keep all of the data secure. Prior to COVID, we were roughly 80 to 120 new veterans in our organization every month. As a result of COVID, we've gotten dropped down to between 40 and 50 new veterans, but the amount of veterans that are already in our system or warriors that are re-engaging with us has gone all the way up to 80. So we're making an impact at the Warrior Alliance every day. And, you know, we're understanding the needs of our warriors and our caregivers.
I love that. The focused aspect of that, the targeted aspect of that, the customization that's involved because we all come from different walks of life, have different needs. I love that component of what I'm hearing. And so for more information, the warrioralliance.org, is that right?
Correct. You can find us, you can reach us at 404-210-1776, or you can go to the warrioralliance.org and register with us. Allow us 48 hours. Our intake coordinator will reach out to you by phone or by email, but you will be connected with the Warrior Alliance.
Outstanding. Appreciate what you do. All right, so let's, here in the last question or two here, Jarrad, I want you to weigh in kind of in the bigger picture. You know, if there's one thing that, you know, that you're spending a lot of time tracking or keeps you up at night, or you find yourself talking with your family about it, you know, day in and day out. We all have those. What's one thing that that you're tracking right now more than others right now when you look at trends and developments and issues and challenges, you name it?
So right now, there's a few things that we're tracking as far as just in the veteran space. One of the major things that we're tracking is the limited amount of resources. Prior to COVID, there was a very good focus on, you know, understanding and ascertaining the needs of our veterans here in the greater Atlanta metropolitan area, throughout the state, and honestly throughout the nation. But when the pandemic hit, a lot of the funding, a lot of the resources, of course, rightfully so, went to assessing and dealing with the pandemic. Unfortunately, one of the things that has not been addressed in our state as well as in our nation is the simple fact that you have more and more people reaching out for more mental health resources. One of the statistics, March of this year, prior to the pandemic, the VA only had 178,000 people requesting telehealth appointments. Now, as of June, that number has spiked up to 780,000 people are requesting telehealth appointments.
Wow. That was June, you said? Holy cow.
Yes, that is June.
Staggering.
So between March and June, and you're not hearing any conversation about mental health. You know, that is something that is definitely concerning. Right now, there is, we cannot ignore the social unrest that we have in our society. You know, when you think about the military and you think about the veteran space, you have to think about the legacy that has. You have to think about the commitment, but you also have to think about the responsibility. Again, we're requesting that the National Guard come in, and we're requesting that the National Guard, you know, come and not protect overseas, but come home and protect different things and try to take care of a lot of things here at home, that's hard for those men and women. You really have to understand that. You have to also think about, as the society, as our economies are starting to reopen and mom and dad want to go to work, well, schools aren't open right now. They're not open for a good reason. We're in the middle of a pandemic, folks. So you have to think about our service members and our veterans that now are just like the rest of society, but it's compounded because some of them have served in different capacities on active duty, and some of them that do have residuals. So the amount of stress under not just the men and women of our country, but just the amount of stress under our service members and our veterans, right now, honestly speaking, I'm just not seeing that attention to detail. One of the things that we're trying to do is to make sure that people understand, listen, when you think about your veterans and you think about your service members, please don't think about us as just a fly-by-night type of thing. No, we are the men and women who are committed to do things that so many are unwilling to do. So please don't forget about us. There's a study that's out right now. When you start thinking about the amount of compensation that active duty service members receive, well, you have a lot of active duty service members that are actually receiving food stamps. That makes no sense. Why? Because their families are not receiving enough compensation that allows them to go out and buy grocery food and different things like that. I mean, major bases were closing. So it's not like we had 20 years ago where you had all of these large facilities where people were just living on its facilities. So those are really the three things that, when I start thinking about what are we looking at, is we're looking at, are the resources going to be here in a year from now when it comes to taking care of our veteran population? Are we looking at higher rates of, unfortunately, suicide? Nobody's reporting on this right now. Unfortunately, we're tracking it, but nobody's reporting on it right now. And, those are the things that we're really focused on. And again, a state like Georgia, in the next 5 years, Georgia's going to have over 2.2 million service members and veterans. That is a large portion of your society or population here in Georgia, and we have to think about it. Are veterans in the state of Georgia receiving the adequate benefits and resources that other states around us are receiving? And unfortunately, no. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about as we, progress and move forward.
Kind of wrap that up. Even though we're in this pandemic time, I hate to borrow cliches, but this is such a historically challenging year. What I'm hearing you say, and we work with a wide variety and sit down with a wide variety of nonprofits, and they all kind of make a point that you're making in a different way, shape, or form, is that just because we are in this unprecedented year, the need for the needs you're serving doesn't stop and call time out simply because we're in a pandemic. I mean, in many cases, correct, as you're pointing out, the need gets greater. So really want to encourage our audience to lean in to veteran service organizations. Check out the warrioralliance.org, see how you can help. And I really admire the way that you clearly, with conviction, are set out to move the needle and help the veteran community and give back, but also give forward and, help us all get through this year of 2020 and help our veteran community get through some of the unique challenges it faces.
So that's also one of the reasons, and I thank you very much for that, but that's also one of the reasons where, for me, it's not just about giving back, as you said. It is really about being progressive and moving forward. I am open to speak to anybody when it comes about the data. You can speak to myself. You can speak to our VP. That's one of the reasons that we use Salesforce. We ask the right questions so we can get the hard, concrete, concise data. There's no need to estimate or wait, for 2017, 2018 reports. I mean, we have the data here on the greater Atlanta metropolitan area, and we are actually seeking more ways to get involved with more so we can get more accurate data to tell the story of the veteran, because it's not just now. We have to think about our future veterans. We have to think about our future service members. And to be very honest with you, there's no reason that with all the technology and all the resources that we have, that we don't make it better for them. It is not fair if we're not making it better for them.
So I hate to wrap it up there, but I love the point you're making. Things have to change, and for things to change, it takes forces, right? You know, between the data, and I love the data-driven approach. It's so important. That way you're not making, no one's making generalizations and assumptions. Hey, this is what the data tells us. And you combine that with experience and proven systems, and of course, leaders that can bring the elbow grease and the leadership bandwidth and know how to drive change. Y'all are writing an outstanding book here, and we look forward to having you back on and getting an update on all the progress you've made. So how can folks connect with you, Jarrad?
Well, primarily, if they're looking to connect with me, again, you can go to thewarrioralliance.org. You can register that way. You can send me an email through thewarrioralliance.org. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Jarrad Turner Sr. on LinkedIn, or just look for the Warrior Alliance. The other thing that I would encourage people to do, if they had any questions, again, just reach out to the organization. You just said it, I'm not that leader that's going to just sit behind a desk. One of the things that a group of men, myself included, are going to do starting September 6th, we're going to run from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. The first day of our run, we're actually going to run around the Capitol for 22 hours to raise awareness for those men and women that have succumbed to suicide. So I'm easy to find, and I do that on purpose. Again, it's going to take hard work and it's going to take sacrifice, but again, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on by going to thewarrioralliance.org. You can also find us on social media, so you can find us on Facebook.
Really grateful for what you do. I'm grateful for the last hour and some change for to kind of reconnect with your story and your journey, but also what you're doing about the issues we face here today, and making it better for folks that deserve it arguably the most, and that's the men and women that served in uniform, whether, as you put it, here domestically or abroad. So thanks so much, Jarrad Turner, Senior Director of Warrior Engagement with the Warrior Alliance. Thank you, Jarrad.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
All right. So on behalf of the whole team here at Veteran Voices, I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did. It was better than the last time I was able to hear Jarrad speak and kind of give his testimony, but also talk about how things have to change and how we've got to serve much more effectively our veteran community. So Scott Luton here, wishing all of our listeners nothing but the best. Hey, do good, give forward, as Jarrad was just talking there, but be the change that's needed. And with that said, we'll see you next time here on Veteran Voices. Thanks, everybody.